Tonight, down to the wire, the battle of the nation's debt limit with a government shutdown in the balance. Plus the Biden agenda, the trillion-dollar bipartisan infrastructure plan up against trillions more in spending. And battle for the Commonwealth.
Terry, I just can't understand how you can just so comfortably lie to everybody. And let's just be clear.
That's what you've been doing all night.
How the governor's race in Virginia sets the tone for the rest of the nation. This is hundreds, if not thousands of Americans remain in Afghanistan.
I believe the level of desperation is even worse now.
All this and more tonight on Faith Nation.
Countdown to the shutdown. Can Beltway lawmakers beat the clock and keep the government running? I'm John Jessup.
Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm Jenna Browder. 30 hours and counting. That is how long lawmakers have before the U.S. could face a government shutdown. Current funding runs out at 11:59 tomorrow night.
Lawmakers are working late into the night to prevent a shutdown, trying to find the best solution that both parties can agree on.
Complicating the process, a second looming debt ceiling deadline. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen says come October 18th, the U.S. will hit its debt limit. Democrats on the Hill vowing to not let that happen.
For more on where things stand, we now turn to Capitol Hill correspondent Abigail Robertson. Abigail, how likely is it that a funding bill will pass before the shutdown?
Well, John, the good news is that it's very likely. The Senate will likely pass a funding bill later tonight or tomorrow morning, and the House will follow suit soon after that. But as for the debt ceiling crisis, Republicans do not want to support Democrats in raising the debt ceiling. They want Democrats to go about this on their own through the budget reconciliation process. But Majority Leader Chuck Schumer says that that is not an option.
Uncharted waters. Individual senators could move to delay and delay and delay. It is very risky and could well lead us to default, even if only one senator wanted that to happen. That's very possible. So you can't do it this route. Everyone who's studied it knows it is risky.
Now, Schumer said Democrats will move forward trying to raise the debt ceiling on their own, and he asked Republicans to get out of the way. But he didn't say how they will do this if they don't use that budget reconciliation process. And White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki also commented on this today, pointing out that the debt ceiling has been raised with bipartisan support almost 80 times in history. And she says that the administration is very disappointed that they don't have that this time around. John, Jenna.
All right, Capitol Hill correspondent Abigail Robertson, thank you. The CBN News chief political analyst David Brody joins us now for more. David, we are coming right down to the wire. We've been here before, and they've always, usually seem to get something passed or some sort of resolution. Do you think Democrats are going to be able to pull this off this time?
John, my head is exploding. There's so much going on Capitol Hill. We haven't even talked about infrastructure and reconciliation, the two big bills. Yeah. Do I think they'll get it done? Yes. What is that? What do I mean by they'll get it done? What is it at this point? I'm talking about I don't think there'll be a government shutdown. I mean, as Abby pointed out, they're going to do something, and it'll probably be this continuing resolution for a few months. That's what they always do. They kick the can down the road, if you will. So I don't think the government's going to shut down. The debt ceiling deal is a whole different ball of wax. We can talk about that till the cows come home. But look, the problem is you're not going to get any Republican senators to go along with a standalone debt ceiling vote. So in other words, you need 60 to raise it. They're not going to get 10 GOP senators. So how are Democrats going to pass the debt ceiling vote without going through reconciliation, which Chuck Schumer says he won't do? So, you know what? I don't know. That's why I'm not a U.S. senator or a congressman. So, and I'm happy about that. Let me just confirm.
Senator David Brody has a nice ring to it. David, though, what do you make of the argument some are making that 90% of the debt was incurred before President Biden was in office, under President Trump? Do Republicans bear responsibility to raising the ceiling on the allowable amount of debt?
I mean, you can play that game, and I call it a game. Maybe it's not a game. I mean, there's no doubt, going back to George W. Bush and Trump for sure, they raised money they spent money like there was no tomorrow as well. So they're guilty of it. I think there's an argument to be made there. Having said that, let's be clear. The Democrats are a party of tax and spend. Don't take my word for it. Take their word for it. That's what they say, tax and spend. And so, that's what they want to do. It's kind of comical because Joe Biden the other day said about this $3.5 trillion budget reconciliation bill. He said it's a $0 reconciliation bill. Everybody's like, $0? Like, yeah, because it's all going to be paid for. Okay, yeah. And I've got a bridge in Brooklyn I'd like to sell you as well.
Yeah, there's no such thing as a free lunch. David, Republicans say Democrats will shoulder the blame if this fails, pointing out that they control the House, the Senate, and the White House. Is that how the public will view it, though?
Yes, and just like Republicans got blamed for the last shutdown when Trump was president. So, for sure, that's the way politics works. And when Democrats control the levers, they control the power. When they control the power, they control the narrative. And they ultimately will take blame for what's happening here with the public as well. Sure thing.
Yeah. All right, CBN's David Brody. Thank you so much, David.
You bet.
Well, to a state election with national implications, the Virginia governor's race is rounding the final bend before Election Day. Last night, the two men vying for the top job met for their second and final debate. Democrat Terry McAuliffe, who formerly held the position, and Republican Glenn Youngkin went head-to-head, battling on everything from abortion to education and, of course, the Trump factor. CBN's Brody Carter is here now with a look at last night's debate and where the race stands now. Brody, we're 6 weeks out, and it's looking like this is a pretty close race.
Well, it certainly is. Early voting for Virginia's governor began September 17th. Recent polls give McAuliffe a 3.5% lead over Youngkin. Many political watchers closely watching this race for any indication of how voters might feel as we approach next year's midterms.
I just can't understand how you can just so comfortably lie to everybody. And let's just be clear.
That's what you've been doing all night, buddy.
It's a political sparring match between Democrat Terry McAuliffe, who served as governor from 2014 to 2018, and Republican hopeful Glenn Youngkin.
He's a total wannabe Donald Trump.
There's an over and under tonight on how many times you're going to say Donald Trump. And it was 10, and you just busted through it. You're running against Glenn Youngkin.
Youngkin finds himself walking a fine line after getting Donald Trump's endorsement, while also trying to win back suburban voters who left the party during Trump's tumultuous presidency.
Donald Trump runs for president in 2024. Will you support him?
Yeah, who knows who's going to be running for president in 2024? And all candor, who knows?
Blow after blow, the two drew political lines on dozens of issues, including hot topics in education, mandatory vaccinations, and abortion.
My opponent, on the other hand, is the most extreme abortion candidate in the country.
Businesses are not going to come to a state where they're putting walls up around their state. He's against gay marriage. He's against abortion.
Prudence Robertson of the pro-life Susan B. Anthony list sees abortion as key, especially with so many states taking action and the Supreme Court preparing to hear a related case in its next term.
Abortion should be the preeminent issue because when you think about it, none of those other issues matter if a person isn't given that first chance at life, that right to live outside the womb.
Youngkin defended his pro-life stance, omitting instances of rape or if the baby threatens the life of a mother. He re-clarified his support of a pain threshold bill to protect babies 20 weeks after conception.
Well, if Terry wins, he will do everything that he can to enshrine Roe versus Wade in the Constitution. He stated that explicitly last night. So if he does win this candidacy, we will see abortion unbarred.
Current polls show the race is now a toss-up. Demographically, McAuliffe has a large advantage in Northern Virginia and the Eastern Tidewater region. Youngkin runs a lead in Western Virginia, and Richmond appears to be the area with greatest political sway. The candidates also debated the end of right to work, border policies, creating jobs, racism, and lowering the crime rate. Other points of contention surrounded much more talk about what to be expected as the coming days draw near to November 2nd. John and Jenna, back to you.
All right, Brody Carter, thank you. And joining us now, Julia Manchester, political reporter with The Hill, who's been following this race closely. Julia, welcome. Great to have you with us this evening. Let's start with some of the polling Brody had mentioned. Real Clear Politics has McAuliffe leading by 3 points. In your estimate, do you think last night's debate moved the needle at all for either candidate?
Well, I think it certainly moved the needle with their bases. Look, I think you saw two things happen last night. You saw Terry McAuliffe very much trying to drive this message home of Glenn Youngkin is Donald Trump, and that they're essentially the same candidate, despite Donald Trump not running for any public office this year. And then you had Glenn Youngkin very much trying to appeal to a broader, I guess, group of voters. I think you saw them both trying to appeal to their bases, but at the same time trying to appeal to moderate voters in Virginia. And we think those moderate voters, the few swing voters that are left in Virginia, really could change the tide in this election. We don't have any immediate data out after that election. However, it'll be interesting to see. It's after the debate, but it'll be interesting to see how it impacts the race.
Julia, you, of course, were there last night covering the debate. There is a moment from last night, a comment that McAuliffe made that's getting a lot of play. McAuliffe said, I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach. Youngkin's campaign quickly produced a new attack ad about that today. Julia, how do you think McAuliffe's remark about parents and schools plays with voters, especially those critical swing suburban voters?
Well, I think this is an issue that plays very well with the Republican base, and a lot of these conservative activist voters that you've seen in Virginia very much being vocal about issues like transgender issues in the classroom and critical race theory. McAuliffe produced a good soundbite for Republicans, and you saw Republicans in Virginia very much take advantage of that last night and today. In terms of the swing voters, we don't really know what issues are going to stick with them yet, because after that debate, we're seeing both of these campaigns push completely different messages on completely different issues. You have Governor Ralph Northam just a couple of hours ago giving a press conference about Youngkin's, what he said was misinformation Youngkin was spreading about the vaccine. And then you have the Youngkin campaign very much focusing on these comments McAuliffe made. So you have the Democrats talking about vaccine mandates as well as abortion rights. And then you have Youngkin very much focusing on this issue of education. So we know those are very important to their respective bases, but we don't know what's going to tip the tide on the swing vote.
All right, Julia Manchester, political reporter with The Hill. We are out of time. Thank you so much for being with us, Julia.
Thank you.
Coming up, the battle over abortion in America. From Texas to Capitol Hill, the latest on the fight for life when Faith Nation returns. Welcome back. The Supreme Court and its use of the so-called shadow docket faced criticism on Capitol Hill today. On occasion, the High Court will hand down orders and summary decisions without hearing oral arguments by the way of that docket. That was the case earlier this month when the court decided not to block a controversial abortion law in Texas, outlawing the procedure after about 6 weeks of pregnancy. Today, some Democrats in the Senate Judiciary Committee claim the Supreme Court used the shadow docket to advance a pro-life political agenda.
We now have two dangerous new precedents to contend with. First, with SB 8, Texas has created a model to undermine constitutional rights by using bounty hunter enforcement schemes. Second, the Supreme Court has now shown that it's willing to allow even facially unconstitutional laws to take effect when the law is aligned with certain ideological preferences.
With us now, Tony Perkins, president of the Family Research Council. Welcome back to Faith Nation, Tony. Republican member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Chuck Grassley of Iowa, split from his Democratic counterparts, saying that the court did something very ordinary in the Texas decision. The premise of today's hearing was to examine the use of the shadow docket. Critics say it appeared to undermine the credibility of the Supreme Court over the issue of abortion. Tony, how do you see it?
I find it very interesting to see Democratic senators like Dick Durbin complaining about the court advancing a political agenda. That's actually what we've been complaining about for decades, that the court has been advancing a political agenda. And here's what proves it. Nancy Pelosi, after Texas law was allowed to go into effect while the case is being adjudicated, Nancy Pelosi says, I'm going to call Congress back to the Hill, and we're going to have a vote to codify Roe v. Wade into law. That's what they voted on last Friday. Now, here's the kicker. It's an admission that abortion on demand was never the law of the land. It was invented by the court. And so now that we have a constitutionalist majority on the court, we're looking at this again. So I just find this very interesting that those that have used the court for so long to do their legislating is now, they're now complaining.
Tony, the House recently passed the Women's Health Protection Act with overwhelming Democratic support. A new article on FRC's blog says the measure proves some Democrats are okay with abortion up until the moment of birth. How does this bill do that?
Well, that's just what I was talking about. That's the bill that Nancy Pelosi wanted to push. It is Roe with an attitude. What it actually does is eliminates everything that the states have done over the last 50 years to begin to take back this territory from the courts, whether it's partial birth abortion bans, whether it's parental consent, whether it's waiting periods, whether it's ultrasound, and so much more, completely wiped out if this law were to go into effect. Fortunately, it's not going to get through the Senate in its current shape. So I'm hopeful that we will see the Senate majority or the Senate minority, the Republicans, hold the line on this. The court will decide this. They're going to have oral arguments in December. We'll get a decision next summer. And hopefully the court will recognize that the court interjected itself back in 1973. This should go back to the states, and a majority of the states, I believe, will stand on the side of life.
Tony, earlier in our show, we reported on the Virginia governor's race. One issue that's become prominent in the election is parents challenging graphic material found in public school textbooks. This is something I know that you've discussed a lot. How much are parents making a difference when it comes to this? And if you can, in about just a few seconds that we have left.
They're making a huge difference. Look, this is like a platoon of mama bears descending upon the left that's had the education of their children in their clutches for years, and they're now dropping it. I applaud what moms are doing all across America. Keep it up. They are making a difference.
All right, Tony Perkins with Family Research Council. Good to see you, Tony. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony.
Good to be with you.
A mission to save Americans. How some are working to rescue U.S. citizens still stuck in Afghanistan. Right after this.
Today, House lawmakers got their chance to question top military officials on the chaotic U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan last month. Joint Chief Chairman General Mark Milley told members of the House Armed Services Committee, now that the U.S. forces are gone, al-Qaeda could reorganize in Afghanistan as soon as early next spring.
That halting admission comes even as some Americans remain stuck in the country, unable to find a way out. As CBN's Chris Mitchell reports, although the United States hasn't revealed how many Americans are stuck, the effort to rescue them isn't over.
These covert videos provide a true look at life inside Afghanistan under Taliban rule, arrests, abductions, and executions.
I believe the level of desperation is even worse now without the U.S. troops there, without any exit, and people are hiding in safe houses and hiding on the run. The Taliban is actually door to door doing executions where they're going to grab people, stuffing them in trunks of cars, and driving them off to execution sites. I can imagine the on-the-ground panic there is even worse than it was during those evacuation days.
When the U.S. announced its pullout, Chad Robichaux joined other retired Special Forces members to form SaveOurAllies.org. He says they rescued more than 12,000 U.S. citizens and Afghan allies during the chaotic weeks before the U.S. military's final flight out.
The good news is that we're still being successful with evacuations, not in the big numbers that we were. We're still getting 100 to 200 people out per day.
This type of rescue operation is nothing new to Dave Eubank of the Free Burma Rangers.
We're trying to help people get out any way we can. And I'm really grateful to the Tajik government that right now has a very humanitarian look of how can we help people.
The White House and State Department put the number of U.S. citizens left behind to about 100. Robichaux says the math doesn't add up.
The truth is, it's not a few hundred. My guess is at least 5,000.
Whatever the number, U.S. citizens are in danger.
They are hunting down people right now, trying to get all the names of anyone they perceive as an enemy.
They're scared. They don't know what to do. They feel abandoned by our country that has a responsibility to help them.
Robichaux and Eubank say leaving no one behind is an American value.
The truth is, it doesn't matter if it's 5,000. It doesn't matter if it's 200. It doesn't matter if it's one. Because from where I come from as an American, especially in the special operations community, if one American is behind enemy lines, if one American's life is in danger, we will use every bit of military force and strength and scorch the earth around that person to rescue that person.
He fears the Biden administration, news media, and much of the world are moving on. For Afghan women, life got a lot worse after this Taliban decree. All widows under the age of 35 whose husbands were killed in the previous regime, if they are still widowed, will marry the Mujahideen of the Islamic Emirate.
We have 20 million women that are immediately declared as sex slaves. The amount of trafficking, sex trafficking, that's going to happen out of Afghanistan.
Article 2. All patriotic and Muslim parents of Afghanistan are called upon to give your daughters over the age of 18 to be given to their husbands in order to maintain Islamic ethics.
Actually, almost every day, Chris, I had started to cry because I thought of these little girls left in the hands of the Taliban. And that's the biggest thing.
And Article 3. All women working in government offices are now ordered to stay in their homes.
The murder and persecution of Christians and all this stuff is happening right now. And it seems like not only the White House and the mainstream media, but the entire international community wants to be silent.
Yet the international community may soon decide if the Taliban will be Afghanistan's recognized government. The Taliban just nominated an ambassador to represent them at the UN. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
It's a bird, it's a plane, it's a president. See the newest comic book, Star Next. Finally tonight, he may not be able to fly and probably never had to fight off any evil villains. But former President Jimmy Carter is getting the superhero treatment.
I love this next story. The Georgia peanut farmer turned 39th Commander-in-Chief can now add comic book hero to his resume. The comic Political Power, Jimmy Carter, is out today. It focuses not only on his years in the West Wing, but also on his 75-year marriage to wife Rosalind and his extensive humanitarian work. Carter's story is the latest in Tide Wave Comics' Presidential Power series. Today's new comic book release is just 2 days before former President Carter's birthday. He turns, get this, Jenna, 97 on Friday.
That's amazing, and he's still out there, just doing amazing things.
Yeah.
We wish him a very happy early birthday.
What a great birthday gift. Thanks for watching Faith Nation.
Have a great night.